and we wouldn't be able to do it the way we got. I'm so glad to see everyone. I want to welcome everyone for coming to the Four Coffee Family Reunion. I know y'all tired of sitting on the Four Coffee Native. I'm proud of Verdie and Miss Gloria for starting the Four Coffee Native. Give them a hand, please.
No. I didn't McKinney. Gloria McKinney.
Yes. Okay, what I want to do now, for a lot of y'all that know, we have a young man that's been playing basketball. And don't get me wrong, we have had a lot of athletes that come out of Fort Coffee. When I tell you a lot of D1, we done had professional ball players, but none of them, when I say none of them, they all say Sparrow. This young man says Fort Coffee. When you put the TV on ESPN, my granddaughter was laying there one night, and she raised over, she said, did they say Fort Coffee? I said, baby, yes, they said Fort Coffee. So I want to introduce Tyler Perry, and for some of y'all don't know who Tyler Perry is, he is the grandson of the late One Night and Sam Winfield. His mother, words, because I'm telling you, when I see Fort Coffee on ESPN and the local news, it makes us feel good. Because most times we see Fort Coffee, they want to say something bad about Fort Coffee. So Tyler, come say a few words.
First of all, I appreciate every single one of y'all for putting this together, especially Angel Ann and the rest of the crew. This is something that I felt was coming for a long time, that we should have been had going on for years. And just to see everybody back on Fort Coffee, you know, it never stops out here. Excuse my shirt, I know it says Spiral on here, but you know, I had to walk around with it on. But like they said, I rep Fort Coffee to the fullest. And people look at me like I speak in a foreign language when I tell them where it's from, where I'm from. But you know, I wear it on my shoulders, high and mighty. And I'm going to forever wear it on my shoulders. I wouldn't be where I am today without 3rd Street and the rest of these little streets out here. The potholes that we got to run over every day. You know, it's just, I'm blessed to be where I'm from. And, you know, I think this community, you know, makes us. And we've had so many athletes that could have did what I did and more. And we've had athletes that did what I did and more. And I'm just trying to reach for the stars. And I'm just super thankful for my community and everybody that's here that's, you know, made this possible. And it doesn't stop with me. You know, that's the biggest thing of why I love coming back. Because we have so many kids out here running around, including my nephews and little cousins. And I'm setting the bar, but I'm hoping they go farther. And that's the biggest thing with me. That's the most important thing in my life is, you know, making sure I go get the next kid out of Fort Coffee that can believe and dream big just like I did. And so, again, just thank you for, you know, allowing me to be here, allowing me to embrace the community. And like I said, I'm a proud Fort Coffeean, and I'm going to wear it on my shoulders.
Okay, I would like, but y'all know it's been a lot going on Fort Coffee in the last year. I've been on Facebook quite a bit. We have a new board. We have a new mayor, Bill Gentry. We have, I'm a trustee, I know I didn't hear you. I'm a trustee now. We have Nita Rooker, that's a trustee on the board. We have Ronnie Steele, that's a trustee, and we have Lonnie Lewis. We have Dolores Steele, which is treasurer, and Lynn Walker, which is our secretary. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get ready and I'm going to turn this over to Verdie and Charlotte. But before I turn it over, I want y'all to see all of these pictures that's up here. Rosetta Depp did this. And what she does, when someone passed, she gets the obituary and she'll cut it out and she'll put it up there. If someone's not up there, it's because she didn't get a chance to get the obituary. But by looking at it, she has put the majority of Fort Coffee on this. I have a candle up here. When they get through speaking, I'm going to light it. And we're going to blow it out as a community. I don't want to cry, but I want to thank Destiny Phillips and my son for wanting us to do this. Y'all don't know how good it made me feel tonight to see all these people here. I have learned so much this last month about who's who. Didn't even know these people related to me until I saw all these pictures. And I just want to thank you guys. I just don't know. I feel so good this morning. I'm not going to be in church. I'm going to turn this over to Verdie and Charlotte.
Good afternoon for a coffee.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, you hear me? Oh, okay. Good afternoon, America. Good afternoon.
You gotta put it up to his mouth.
Good afternoon, Native America. I'm going somewhere with this. That's the reason why I introduced that. It's because the majority of you in this room should be shown two dual citizenships. You are Americans and you are, or should be, Native Americans. Most of you all in this room are either Choctaws, Chickasaws, or Creeks. But I would like first to acknowledge some people. I would like to acknowledge the Honorable Mayor, Bill Gentry. Is he in here? I would like to acknowledge the Honorable Vice Mayor, Anita Rucker. And all the council members and everybody else that worked to put this together. When I saw Joanna Whitfield on Facebook telling about how they were working out here getting things ready for this event, I went back into time. I went back into time based upon my readings of how a tradition started in the Creek Nation after they were liberated in 1866. They celebrated their freedom. They called it Emancipation Day. And the men would build benches. They would build tables. They would kill hogs. They would kill beef. And the women would put together dishes, side dishes. And they celebrated their freedom, not for 2 days. They celebrated for 2 weeks at a time. It has started in the Creek Nation. It has sort of permeated throughout the other nations, and it kind of phased out after it got farther and farther away from slavery. But I just had a flashback when I saw them do that. I would like to thank Charlotte for volunteering me for this assignment. Thank you very much. And my wife, Verdie Triplett. If you all haven't met my wife, her name is Verdie Triplett. Thank you for putting up with me. And the reason why I say that is because I get calls all the time from people across the country wanting to know genealogy, want to know their genealogy. And we talk, and we talk. And she's passing by. And after about 3 or 4 hours, we'll still talk. Or I go and I dig into my documents, having everything all misplaced and everything. She has to go and clean up behind me. But anyway, she's Creek. She's a Creek freedman. Her dad is or was a Dawes enrollee, born 1902, an extreme high-profile educator that taught school for years, superintendent for years at Taft High School. And if any of you ever go to prison, you'll be going to a prison there outside Taft named in his honor, the Eddie Warrior
Correctional
Center. But anyway, thank you very much. I was wondering, can you all hear me if I don't use this mic? My voice is kind of heavy. I can.
You're gonna have to. Okay. Can I hold this for you?
Let me have that paperwork right there. Yeah, that, please. I got it. I want to make sure I get these names because I'm getting ready to introduce some people to you all. And I would love to have your participation. I would just like for you to stand. Or if you can't stand, just raise a finger to acknowledge these people. And the people that I'm going to name are the trailblazers of what is now Ford Coffee. Either directly or indirectly. They were the pioneers, if you will. If it wasn't for them enduring, persevering, and surviving, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for these people. So I'm going to call their name and I ask you to stand. And I know the people, so if you're not quite sure, I will tell you. Okay, George Johnson. Let me tell you a little bit about George Johnson. And I'm going to try to move fast because I don't know if time is of essence or not. So I'm going to try to move fast as possible, okay? George Johnson was a slave to a Choctaw Indian. He had a son named Albert Johnson. Now, Albert Johnson, we know he was around in 1849. He was born in slavery. His slave master's name was Mosley Colbert. And they had a daughter that was born in 1889. Her name was Miss Anna Johnson. So, Anna Johnson married Henry Hugh Dave McCassin Jr. So all of the McCassins in this room, would you please stand or raise your hand? Please stand in order. Please stand in honor of these people. Because if it hadn't been for Mr. George Johnson, Albert Johnson, enduring slavery, you all wouldn't be here. Zach Moncrief. Zach Moncrief was a slave to Samson Moncrief. He had sons. Zach had sons. Moses Eubanks, Henry Hempsey Eubanks, and Thaddeus Eubanks. Of course, Moses Eubanks married Laura Rogers and had Miss Lizzie Anderson, who married Dempsey Anderson, who was a Creek citizen. So, if you would, all the Eubanks family, if you're here, will you please stand? Rebecca Eubanks, and Columbus Eubanks, Richard Eubanks. I thought I saw Thaddeus Eubanks' descendant here a while ago. Chris Eubanks, you all remember Mr. Johnny Eubanks' Spiral, right? Yes. Mr. Johnny Eubanks was the grandson of Thaddeus Eubanks, Moses' brother. Tyler Clayton. Tyler Clayton was a slave to Tom Ainsworth. And he had Miss Annie Clayton, James Clayton, Willie Clayton. So all the Claytons in this room, please stand. If it hadn't been for Mr. Tyler surviving, you wouldn't be here today. Hetty Lucas. Hetty Lucas is my great-great-grandmother. She was a slave to a Chickasaw Indian named Lem Reynolds. So all of the triplets, will you stand that's in here? Yes, I'm the only one here. Oh, I'll see you. Rachel LaFleur Brown, Rachel Brown. Rachel Brown, slave owner, was Campbell LaFleur. And Rachel was married and married William Brown and had Rufus and William. And so all of our Brown family, will you please stand? Amanda Foster married Moses Parker and had Miss Lily Parker Burris, and all of the Burris's, Frederica, Miss Anna Burris, Pearl Burris. Any Burris's in the family, will you please stand up in honor of Miss Amanda? If it hadn't been for Amanda, you wouldn't be here today. Caesar Boyd. Caesar Boyd was a slave, Choctaw Indian slave. Matilda Boyd was his daughter. I think we got some Boyds in here. Tabibi, did I see the Tabibi in here?
Yesterday.
Okay, all of these people are Mr. Henry Cutchelow's people. Caesar Boyd came out of that. Yeah, there's Tabibi. Yes, Caesar Boyd was a slave. He lived over around Calhoun, but he had Matilda Boyd, George Boyd, Mobile Boyd. As a matter of fact, George Boyd and Mobile Boyd heard Abraham Lincoln when he said, if you should happen to escape your plantation and make it to Union forces, we will protect you. So when Lincoln issued that, they escaped their plantation here in Scullyville and went to Fort Smith, Arkansas, and joined the 83rd U.S. Colored Troops and fought for their freedom. Unfortunately and sadly, George Boyd didn't make it back. He got killed in the Battle of Saline, Battle of Jenkins Ferry there right outside Little Rock in 1864. But Mobile came back, and I did some research and I found out where he's buried. He's buried over at Brazil Cemetery just west of Shady Point. Oh, this is a good one here. Mr. Edward Ned Campbell. That's my great-great-grandfather. All the Campbells, stand up, please. All the Campbells. I tell this story all the time because it's a good one, you know. Hey, he was a hell raiser. Oh, he raised some hell on the plantation.
All right.
Yes, he did. I mean, he was a fighter, man. He was a fighter. He didn't take no stuff off the overseer. I mean, it was so bad, his slave owner, Miss Hodge. Now, the plantation just right over here at Brayton. If you all remember, the older ones here, if you all remember where William B. Phillip and Brayton, the bus used to go into Spyro. You know, the house was right down from the main big house there. That was the John Ream, Miss Hodge plantation. That's where he was a slave at. So Miss Hodge got tired of Edward Ned. He said, now look, told overseer, I want you to haul old Ned and his wife Bill sit down to Texas and see if you can get a price on him. So they loaded him in a wagon the way you do horses and cows and hauled him down to Texas. But they couldn't get a price on him. Now, I don't know if he was raising hell on the auction block or what. But anyway, he ended up on a plantation there on the Red River, the Robert Jones plantation. Robert Jones was a big-time Choctaw slave owner that owned land all the way from Idabel to Ardmore. And he had over 500 slaves. And Edward Ned ended up on that plantation because Robert Jones was his slave owner when he was liberated in 1866. But that was a good one. And the good thing about it was, Edward Ned was a preacher. He was a preacher. You know, preachers are very outspoken, you know what I mean? They can throw some scriptures on you, man, and you know. Jacob Hall. Now, Jacob Hall is another one that heard Abraham Lincoln and escaped his plantation and fled to Fort Smith and joined the 83rd. But Jacob Hall was the father of Square Hall. And I know you all probably heard of Square Hall. That's Cousin Anna's grandpa. Square Hall was the father of Jake and all the other halls. But anyway, all of the deaths, or if there's in the halls, will you please stand up? Are there the deaths in the house? Okay, they are direct descendants of Jacob Hall, and if Jacob Hall hadn't survived slavery and all of that, they wouldn't be here today. Adeline Butler. Adeline Butler was a slave to a Choctaw Indian. She was the mother of William Burrs. William Burrs married Lily Parker. That started the Burrs family here in Fort Coffee. Ann May. Ann May was a slave to an A. Gary. Ann May was the mother of Aunt Elsie, my great-great-grandmother Georgia Ann. So, are there any Mays in here? I see Campanella, there's Herbert, all of Cousin Burma's grandkids and kids. If you're in here, Marlene, the Millers, the Triplets, you all stand up because Ann May was our great-great-grandmother. That's how we are related.
I didn't even know it. Verdie.
Wiley Frazier. Wiley Frazier was a slave to a Choctaw Indian and started the Frazier line here in Fort Coffee. Do we have any Fraziers? Please stand up, please. There you go. Just about finished. Thomas Blackwater. Thomas Blackwater also heard Abraham Lincoln and fled his plantation and fought for his freedom. He had a daughter. He married Annie Blackwater, and they had a daughter named Rebecca. And Rebecca had 2 children, Mr. Willie Coulter and Henry Coulter. I know a lot of you remember them. Okay, and his descendants are Tim and Ron Shepard that lives in Spiro, and Miss Mary Dell that married Hobart. Miss Mary Coulter that married Hobart, that's their ancestry. These people, and I selected these people specifically because I was trying to anticipate the people that were going to be here today. And these people pretty much cover all of us. These people survived. That's the reason why that we need to honor them. They are the trailblazers. They are the pioneers. They came here with the Indians. They came to these documents 8 decades prior to Oklahoma statehood. They were the Alphas. Right around here, they endured slavery. Now, after slavery, we had a lot of influx of what the Indians called, the black Indians called, people that came from the United States into the Indian Nation. They called them state Negroes. They were state Negroes. They came from the United States into the Indian Nation. They came after slavery. There are numerous reasons why we think they came. I mean, why would they leave a country and come to the Indian Nation to fates unknown? Why would they do that? Well, based upon my readings, and if you can get this book, I have gotten it and I've read it, but if you can get this book by Ken Barnes, he's a professor at the University of Central Arkansas. The name of the book is, I quote, Who Killed John Clayton, Political Violence, The Emergence of the New South, 1861 to 1895, and that book would give you a perspective of what was going on in central Arkansas during that time, right after slavery ended in 1865 in the United States. It was political violence. It was KKK on steroids, simply because of when Lincoln freed the slaves gained the right to vote via the 15th Amendment, and when that happened, they started voting. They voted heavily Republican. You had carpetbaggers that came in from the Northeast to take full advantage of whatever the South had to offer during that time, whether or not it's slavery or sharecropping or politics. Well, a lot of them got into politics, and they built coalitions of whites and newly voting blacks, and they were winning elections. The Dixiecrats, the Republicans were winning elections over the Dixiecrats because the Dixiecrats were pro-slavery, the Republicans were anti-slavery. So they started winning elections, and the Democrats got extremely jealous, and they started suppressing the black vote with lynchings, murders, disappearances, and all of that. They had a Back to Africa movement in the late 1800s. Some went to Monrovia, Liberia. Others went to the Indian nations. In my thinking, a lot of them left because they had lost faith and hope in the United States of America, and they came to the Indian nations seeking a better life. So you had an influx of people coming in from Arkansas and throughout the South. And let me name a few so I can keep it moving, okay? Now these people right here were instrumental too. If it hadn't been for them, we wouldn't be here today, because a lot of those state Negroes came in and they married Indians, and when they married Indians, their kids became Indians, because citizenship and all of that is an inherited state of being. Thomas Jefferson Lewis. I'm just going to name these. I'm going to move fast. The Lewis family. Thomas Jefferson married Aunt Lily Jones and had William. And you all know William and Hosea Lewis and all of them. William Wesley Jones. That's my great-grandfather. They all moved in here after slavery ended. Benjamin Franklin Scott. He come out of Kansas, which was a free state, but he came here. George Brewer, my great-grandfather, our great-grandfather, though, from a lot of his people. Dad. Patrick Henry Phillips, Charlie Duggan, Robinson Carruthers, Henry Show, Albert Dell, Armand Triplett, Johnny Johnson, Thomas Blocker, Dude Blocker, Thomas Blocker. They all came in here after slavery had ended. Then you can throw in Mr. Frank Henderson, George Evans, Mr. Henry Hughley McCaskey. He and Miss Anna Johnson came into LaFleur County in 1920 because the majority of their children were born in Berwyn, Springer, Oklahoma. So they all came here. So we should honor them. Let's please just have a moment of silence for these people. Just a moment of silence, please, because they were trailblazers and they are the ones that survived in order for us to exist. Thank you very much. When speaking of Ford Coffee, town of Ford Coffee and its people, there are three stories that need to be told. One, the Indian removal, because that's how we got here. Two, the fort coffee, the fort itself, because that's how we got our name, the town got its name, Fort Coffee. Let's talk about the removal. Once upon a time, there were 5 tribes in the southeast United States, minding their own business, untouched by Europeans. They were hunters, gatherers, just lived their normal lives. But Europeans landed on Plymouth Rock. And when the Europeans landed on Plymouth Rock, they came in numbers. They kept coming. They kept coming. Slave trade started in 1619. They started coming with their slaves. They kept coming. Finally, they caught up with the 5 tribes. The Choctaws and Chickasaws were in Mississippi and Alabama. The Cherokees were in Georgia, the Carolinas, and parts of Tennessee. And the Creeks were in Lower Alabama and Florida. And the Seminoles were in Florida. The white man caught up with them. The 5 tribes were very receptive to them. They came in, set up shop, had farms, big farms, and engaging in slavery. They started intertwining and intermarrying with the Indians, so the tribes became wider and wider and wider. And then finally, they started engaging in slavery. I mean, they no longer were gatherers and ranchers. They became big-time farm owners that needed slaves. And some of those slaves were our ancestors. Okay, let's fast forward to 1830. Because remember, the U.S. was growing. And Europeans were coming. And they wanted that land. Finally, Andrew Jackson was the president at that time, 1830. He was the president. And he gave up on supporting the 5 tribes. Now I'm speaking Choctaws and Chickasaws now, but mostly Choctaws because that's what most everybody in here are. So anyway, the U.S. gave up on the tribes. Jackson turned his back on them. So they came into an agreement. We'll give up our land here in exchange for land west of the United States, what is now Oklahoma. So they gathered outside Macon, Mississippi in 1830 at Dancing Rabbit Creek. As a matter of fact, they signed the treaty, and the name of the treaty is the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek. And that's what spearheaded the Choctaw removal, and that started the Trail of Tears. A lot of those Choctaws, a lot of them sold a lot of their personal belongings to purchase slaves, to bring with them on the Trail of Tears. A lot of them came on the Trail of Tears. They suffered on the Trail of Tears. And some of those slaves were our people. As a matter of fact, in my research, you can see the boys, Caesar boys, coming as they left Mississippi. They were the slaves of Dr. Jim Boyd. They would stop. They stopped in Lamar, Mississippi. That's where a lot of them were born. George Boyd and Mobile Boyd were born in Lamar, Mississippi. Matilda Boyd was born here in the Choctaw Nation. So you can see how they was moving along that trail. So they landed in Fort Smith. A lot of them came by boat. The majority of them came by boat. They utilized the various rivers, the Arkansas River, the Alabama River. And they were dropped off. They were dropped off at Bell Point in Fort Smith. Now during this time, Fort Smith was established in 1817, but it closed in 1824. And the reason why it opened in 1817 is to stop the Cherokees and the Osage from fighting. But it closed in 1824, so when the Choctaws came here, they asked the U.S. Army, the Department of Army, to build a fort in the Choctaw Nation to stop illegal whiskey from coming into the Choctaw Nation and illegal contraband. So that's where they built Fort Coffee. This was 1832. They built Fort Coffee. It only stayed open for about 2 years. And then it was turned over to the Choctaw Nation, and they utilized it for a boys' school. And they utilized it up until 1863. That's what they used it for. And then Fort Smith opened back up in 1838. It opened back up in 1838 because they didn't have no presence after they closed Fort Coffee, so they decided to open it back up. But anyway, when the slaves got here, I mean, they were on various plantations all around here. You had the John Ream plantation that I stated earlier. You had the William Hall plantation that was right north of Spiro. You had the Moncrief plantation that was over by Pino. Mostly all these areas along the Arkansas River and the creeks and all of that were plantations because they were avid for farming. And that's where our ancestors were slaves. Until the war started. When the war started, the 5 tribes fought for the South during the Civil War. And of course the North won. And when the North won, the North was, the U.S. was extremely angry at the 5 tribes for fighting against them in the Civil War. So they started squelching their land. Because slavery had ended in 1865 in the United States, and the U.S. did not want slavery in their backyard, so they had the 5 tribes, the chiefs, to meet in Fort Smith so that they could sign, they call them either or. Either you free your slaves, give them citizenship, and adopt them and give them the right to vote, or we will eliminate you with the stroke of this pen. So they decided to sign their respective treaties, and the slaves in the Indian nations were freed in 1866, a year after the slaves in the United States were freed. But the Choctaw Nation didn't adopt. They didn't abide by the treaty right away. They didn't adopt until 1885. But you got to understand how it worked. The 5 nations, the 5 tribes, the nations, they were set up as nations, had their own sovereignty and tribal governments and all of that. They owned the land. Didn't nobody own any land. But if you were a citizen, you had access to the land. You could go find your piece of land, set up, raise your family, but you never owned the land. All right, when blacks got their freedom, they didn't have no choice but to stay on old Mouse's plantation because they couldn't just go find land because it was already taken up from from all the citizens prior to their citizenship. So they had to stay on old Mouse's land and be sharecroppers. So they did that up until 1898. They did that until 1898. That's when the white man had caught up with them again. And they needed what is now Oklahoma because everything was moving westward. They had westward expansion. So they caught up with them again because they needed that land. First of all, they wanted to build a railroad from Fort Smith, Arkansas to New Mexico. And the 5 nations, the Choctaw, the Cherokee Nation, Creek Nation, stood in the way. So, between 1898 and 1906, they opened up Oklahoma land They fragmented it, tribal communal land into individual land allotments. It's called the Dawes enrollment process. They were setting the stage for the new state of Oklahoma. And if you were an Indian, they took care of them first. You had to go in and enroll before the Dawes Commission. You went through an interview or a series of interviews. And if it proved out that you were always lived in the respective nation of Choctaw Nation, you got 40 acres of land. If you was on the Freedman Road, they had two different roads, the Freedman Road and the By Blood Road. Black people were put on the Freedman Road because it amounted to 40 acres of land. If you were put on the By Blood Road, you got 160 up to 320 acres of land. But regardless, the Choctaws got their land via the Dawes enrollment process. And for the first time, they owned their land. For the first time, they owned their own land. And they started living on their land. They left their old masters' former plantation and went and lived on their land. I can see it now. Square Hall, building his house on his land allotment. Right there where James Bell has his garden. That's where he built his house. And while he was building his house, he was living with my great-great-grandmother, Eddie Reynolds, that lived right where Fat Schultz lived. That was her 40-acre land allotment. She was the original landowner of that land for the new state of Oklahoma. And they became farmers. I mean, that's where the small farms were created. They were farming on their land. A lot of them lost it, maybe due to taxes or whatever the case may be, but for the first time they had their own land. And they lived on it. But when Oklahoma became state in 1907, Article 1 of the Constitution was Jim Crow separation of races. That was the first law that was made, and it was proposed by a Cherokee Indian. So our ancestors had to go through Jim Crow all through the 20s, all through the 30s, up until 1964, when the 1964 Civil Rights Bill was passed. But now we get into people that you all know and what they endured. But there's only three pieces, I'm kind of getting to a close here now, but there were only three pieces of documentation that I've seen where Ford Coffee was called, the community was called Ford Coffee. The Choctaw Nations in the latter part of the 1800s, they started building schools for the descendants of former slaves. They had schools, Dog Creek, Coxville, and they had one in Fort Coffee right here. It was called the Fort Coffee Neighborhood Colored School. That's the first piece of documentation that I've seen where the community was called Fort Coffee. And the only thing I can think of is the Choctaw Nation did it. Because Fort Coffee was named after John Coffee. John Coffee is the one that negotiated the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek. He and Andrew Jackson were family members. He was the Brigadier General of Tennessee. Andrew Jackson was married to John Coffey's paternal aunt. So they had a family connection there. And then they have a lot of things named in John Coffey's honor. There's a Coffeyville, Mississippi. There is a Coffeyville, Alabama. There is a Coffeyville County, Alabama. There is a bridge that crossed the Tennessee River right outside Florence, Alabama, that's named after John Coffey. So, he had it going on. Although he was a slave owner, along with Andrew Jackson, they were slave owners. But that piece of documentation is the first overt documentation I saw where the community was called for a coffee. The next piece of documentation that I saw was in 1976 when a group of men in Fort Coffee organized. Mr. Benjamin Scott, the Buster Show. I'm speaking of memory. The Buster Show, Floyd Lee, Henry Burst, and a few more. Roy Dale. They organized. It was called